G'day. Finally, spring is here. And what better way to celebrate than with chocolate? You're in for a sweet treat. But first, let's see what other goodies are on this week's show.
I'm Sophie Thompson and I got to grow up in the most amazing garden. My father was the old breed of nurseryman who loved plants, and he wouldn't actually let a customer take one home if he thought they were going to kill it. He was very protective on who he'd let his babies go home with.
I want to show you one way to propagate elephant foot yam. I'm just going to cut off each one of these individual yams here, and they can go into pots.
And I'll show you how using the right fertiliser can feed your soil, your plants and you.
For more than a century, Australians have had a love affair with chocolate. On average, we each eat 6 kilos of the stuff every year, putting us in the top 10 chocolate-eating nations. And our appetite for the sweet treat is growing every year. I'm here in the Royal Botanic Gardens in Sydney to meet the Director of Horticulture in a new exhibition space open to the public. And the first exhibition is all about chocolate. Why did you choose chocolate?
Well, I was trying to come up with an idea for what do I do to talk about science and conservation in a conservatory in a greenhouse. My usual creative process is go home, turn on some music, pop up on the couch, eat something, and that day it was chocolate, which is most days. And I'm eating away and looking at my fingers and thinking, what do I talk about? What do I talk about? Do we talk about orchids? Do we talk about flowers? Do we... Chocolate. Chocolate is the story. Chocolate's 5,000 years of history. It's the rainforest wrapped up in a chocolate bar.
Where does chocolate grow? It
grows only within 10 degrees north or south of the equator. So the equator is the belt around the middle of the globe. So only just at small tips, only a few countries that actually touch around that area. Australia is one of them. We can grow chocolate in the northern Queensland area. So we don't think about it, but that area is also, chocolate was the perfect story, but it's all the things that add to it. The rainforest is also the home of vanilla and spices and Brazil nuts and cashews and nutmeg. 80% of our food crops originated in the rainforest. So that's an amazing story. 2/3 of the world's plant life lives in the rainforest.
2/3?
2/3. 1/3 of our biodiversity of animals live in the rainforest. So you just think about that little bitty belt around the middle. It's kind of like your pants belt. The belt falls off, it all falls off. So that belt is the most probably biodiverse region. It's the cradle of life. It's probably one of the most important areas of our whole planet.
Can you tell me a little bit more about this amazing plant?
Well, chocolate is a really cool plant. First of all, the name, Theobroma cacao. Theobroma is Latin for food of the gods.
Yeah, theo, that's a Greek word.
God, theology. This is a food that people worship even to today. But amazing thing to me is these little tiny flowers that actually bloom on the trunk of the tree. And it's pollinated by little midges and ants and aphids and thrips, and then produces this giant fruit. There's multiple cultivars and varieties actually found across the world, depending on where you're at. And this one's actually Carrillo. Differences are in the flavor and the size of the fruit and the color, no different than picking a different variety of apple.
So what farming methods have you replicated here?
Well, instead of the typical historical, more common method of growing chocolate in rows and actually in a very cleared plantation, we've gone back to what is actually becoming the new way of growing chocolate. It's actually growing under the canopy of rainforest trees in conjunction with other food crops. So think banana trees and vanilla vines growing, coconut palms, which we have here. But most importantly, the soil is happier, which means the little midge that lives in the soil most of the year and then actually flies up here and pollinates that little tiny flower. You get more midges. You get more midges, you get more chocolate, you get more chocolate, you get more money, and you don't have to cut as much rainforest down.
What plants have you selected for this section of your rainforest?
Well, this rainforest, we actually recreated in Amazonia, the South American rainforest, because that's where chocolate's from. The rainforest is all about stratification. It's the different layers of the trees and the ground covers and the bushes. This particular vine, this beautiful fleshy leaf vine, is vanilla. It's an ingredient of chocolate, but also if you grow vanilla outside of the South American rainforest where it's native to, you have to hand pollinate it. Why is vanilla so expensive? Think about your 8-hour day doing this, basically pollinated 1,000 flowers.
So vines are a really big part of the rainforest.
Absolutely. Vines are actually one of those structural components of the rainforest. They're opportunists. They're actually there to fill in the gaps as soon as the sun comes through and a tree falls over. This one's Fittonia, and it's actually the giant Fittonia, Fittonia gigantea. And if you actually look at most houseplants we actually grow in your house, I guarantee you almost every one of them is from the rainforest. Because why? They grow in deep shade because, you know, sitting there beside your lounge or your TV is about the only light they get. But this one's huge leaves, grows at the bottom of the canopy. Rainforests across the whole globe are actually under threat. Right now, they estimate about 80,000 hectares per day are lost. That's up about 60 hectares per minute. My hope with the exhibit is, by the time you get through with it, you might have learned a little bit about the rainforest, a little bit about chocolate, a little bit about what we do as a science organization. But most importantly, the next time you go to the grocery store and reach up and buy a bar of chocolate, you might turn it around to the back and look at it and go, yeah, this one actually helps the planet just a little bit. Maybe I'll pay an extra 50 cents for it. So make a little bit of a difference.
When I'm in the garden, there's one thing that you'll always see by my side. It's this, my secateurs holster. And this was given to me by a friend for my 25th birthday. It's custom made from leather by a saddle maker. And you can see it's really durable. But it's more than sentimental. It's also immensely practical. Without one, you're always putting your secateurs down where you have half a chance of losing them. But also, if they're put down in the soil, there's a good chance that you'll pick up diseases which can then be passed on to your plants when you're pruning. So, my tip to you is get yourself a good secateur pouch. And if you get a really good one and a special one, you'll keep it for a lifetime.
I'm in the kitchen garden of the Royal Mail Hotel in Dunkeld, about 300 kilometres west of Melbourne, near the Grampians. And it's special for a number of reasons, but mostly because it's one of Australia's largest restaurant gardens.
The kitchen garden and the restaurant are integral to each other. One can't survive without the other. Good morning, Bruce. How are you this morning?
Michelle Shanahan is the kitchen garden specialist, and she has her work cut out, keeping up with the demands of a busy restaurant.
The chefs can watch from when they're first grown as a seed, and they can use that plant from any of that time. The garden's theirs to use how they like.
We come here every morning. We pick for about an hour, and basically we want to pick for the day, so everything's as fresh as possible.
Just picked some white strawberries, they're for a trout dish. So basically we're going to pickle these with a black pepper pickle. This is a little accompaniment with a trout.
Michelle, how big is the garden?
Within the brush fence, within the kitchen garden, we're just under a hectare.
How many types of veggies would you grow?
I've got a spreadsheet of roughly between 600 and 700 seed or plant lists that I grow at any one time. The restaurant's very dependent on the kitchen garden. What I'm actually growing at a particular time dictates what is on the menu.
The restaurant sets a cracking pace, so Michelle needs to have a good system in place to keep up.
Well, the garden's made up of about 3 different sections. We've got the main garden beds, which I do a 5-crop rotation plan with that. Then we've got 3 igloos. The 2 larger igloos are mainly for growing tomatoes and also lettuces in winter. Then we've got the small igloo, which is for more tropical plants. Then we've got the orchard area, which I've got espaliered apples and pears and so forth. And then behind the lemon verbena hedge, there is the herb garden and the picking flower garden.
It really is very extensive, isn't it? Michelle faces the same challenges as most gardeners do, but on a bigger scale. Now, you grow organically, so what do you do about pests?
Okay, well, I use a lot of exclusion here in the garden, which seems to work, and these cloches are one of them. These keep off the white cabbage moth, which we get an abundance of them here in the Western District. So you only need 1 cabbage moth to get onto a plant to destroy your crop, and they're very easy to just lift off for the chefs to come and pick.
And look at that, they're beautiful. Chinese cabbages, they're beautiful.
Yes.
Now, what about the ducks?
Well, look, the ducks are a great add-on into the garden. Rocket and his girls, they wander around collecting all the slugs and the snails. The cloches also help keep the ducks off the young seedlings.
Robin Wickens is the executive chef of the restaurant, and he's just as excited as Michelle about the garden and the fresh produce that's grown here.
We use everything from the garden. It really means we can design the menu around what's growing right now, so it's changing constantly. So we're probably writing new menus every week or every couple of weeks.
And how do you confer with Michelle? What's that process?
We have a pretty good plan of what's happening for almost the whole year planned out ahead, and that's sort of based on last year's produce. So if we had too much of something or not enough of something, and then we'll talk about new things we want to grow or varieties of something that work or don't work.
Robin, these cauliflowers are really due to be picked and to be used, so they really need to go within the next week.
Okay, they look really good. We'll use them maybe in the new beef dish, so we can use them in a couple of different ways, roasted and maybe a puree. We've got quite a few, so could we get some purple cauliflowers in?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's on my list next to do.
It's a big ask, but Michelle is more than up to the challenge.
I love the whole experience, from propagating from seed to planting, to watching and nurturing the plant and watch it grow, to when the chefs come and pick every day, and then it goes up to the restaurant and make it into some amazing dish.
Well, I just got my first passion fruit and that was very exciting. Definitely growing vegetables is really great.
Probably the most joy is I like growing food, you know, so I grow herbs and I grow veggies, and so every evening harvesting something and bringing it inside is just contributes to just general well-being, I think, to my family.
I think when you planted something and when it blooms and it's bear seeds, and when you planted the seed, then it just grows up again. So, you know, like a whole cycle of life with seed.
Probably something new sprouting out, and then I love cutting some of it to always have arrangements in the house.
Just being able to relax and get away from life's stresses and, yeah, be a bit creative, yeah.
Probably seeing the bees and the birds actually being attracted to what you've put in the ground and seeing plants thrive probably makes me quite sad when they die. So I try not to get too attached.
When the grass is cut and the plants, all the weeds are out, and I'm sitting with a glass of wine or a beer in my hand looking.
I want to show you one way to propagate elephant foot yam, but to do that I've got to dig one up. And the cue to do that is when the plants die down and rest during winter. And this looks like a good place to start. Look at this, a little bit more than I expected. That is the growing point that the stem was attached to, and what I thought I was going to show you would have been something looking like this. But instead, it's covered. All these little swellings here, each one can be cut off to become a new plant. So I've got dozens of them from the one plant. And now, under these happy circumstances, I can show you two ways to propagate elephant's foot yam, starting with the easiest. I'm just going to cut off each one of these individual yams here, and they can go into pots. The trick with these plants is they are dormant, so they don't want to be watered, and if you do water them at this stage, these cut ends, there's a risk they may rot. And this is a warm climate plant. So they can be potted up immediately, And that's the growing point there. That goes facing upwards, and cover it with a little bit of potting mix. But then I'm not going to water it. I'm going to leave it dry until we get into the storm seasons. So that might be the middle of spring or early summer. Then they'll need watering. So now I've got that out of the way, I've probably got about 30 extra plants. This is really what I wanted to show you, and this is the technique that I wanted to share with you. When you peel these plants, getting them ready to be boiled and cooked, they make wonderful wedges, just like potatoes. Removing these peelings can allow you to propagate them. This is full of little growing points, and just simply by putting these peelings onto a seed tray of fresh propagating mix, you can sprout these, just like these plants. This is still dormant, so it doesn't need to be kept wet. Just allow the peelings to seal and heal, and then when the weather warms up, in the storm seasons, you can add some water and you'll get a thicket of young plants from this one yam. Now, when the plants are big enough to separate, you can separate them, put them in pots, and off you go again. This really is one of the most willing forms of potato I've ever grown, and I've now got an appreciation why people grow so much of it in South and Southeast Asia. It's dead easy. I think it's going to be a long time before I run out of yams.
Good morning, guys. Out you go, out you go. Come on. I'm Sophie Thompson, and I've been a presenter on Gardening Australia for 11 years. I grew up in a gardening family. My parents had a big plant nursery. And my father also had a series of florist shops. My parents talked plants and gardening at the table. As a child, I didn't necessarily like that. So I sort of was overexposed to plants and gardens. And as a child, I just wanted to go to a toy shop or a playground. But I got to grow up in the most amazing garden, filled with magnificent big trees. The trees, more than anything else, gives me the awe of nature. My father was the old breed of nurseryman who loved plants, and he wouldn't actually let a customer take one home if he thought they were going to kill it. He would unload their trolley and say, "Where do you live?" and actually take plants out of their trolley. You know, we carried over 2,000 varieties of plants, so lots of rare plants, and he was very protective on who he'd let his babies go home with. So I worked in the florist shops till I was 16. Definitely had no plans on getting involved in the nursery. Saw my parents work 7 days a week. I couldn't think of anything worse as a teenager. So I went off to do my thing and became a naturopath. 1 month before I qualified as a naturopath, my dad died, and I came back home to South Australia to give Mum a hand. I was thinking it was only going to be for a couple of months. And after a couple of months, I actually found out that I actually loved the nursery. When my mother turned 70, we realised that she wanted to retire. So I'd had a great time in it. I love what I did, but it was time to move on. I started work as a garden consultant, and I just bought this beautiful property around Old Sandstone Chapel, and I had started creating the garden there. Probably when we sold the nursery is when I got into gardening more than plants, because I actually had more time to play my garden, and I realised that all I wanted to do 24/7 was play in the garden. Richard and I met and got together. He was growing cut flowers commercially at the time. So then we started our family, and it seemed logical to have number 2 after we had number 1, and then we decided, number 3 would be great. We decided to go for number 4. I thought logically, even the numbers up, create more harmony. And then blessed with twins, twin girls at the end of it all. Okay, guys, get stuck into it. I did try and go for number 6 to even the numbers out, but Richard wouldn't have a bar of it.
That bit.
And we went on a bit of a journey to find where we wanted to live that was close to the kids' school, and we ended up here. Now, Violet, I have only just found out that you kids have been putting Jojo the guinea pig on my veggie table. I wondered what was wrecking it. So why do you put him on there?
Because he eats everything and he doesn't run away.
He seems to have a pretty good life. Having lots of animals around, I think, is really good for kids. And having kids is a good excuse for me to have lots of animals. So I just think these caterpillars are amazing. They're the monarch caterpillars. And it might look like I keep them for the kids, but really I keep them for me. And so we have them outside in the garden and in vases where you can see the process up close and personal.
When we were sweeping, we found them on the floor. And then they'd crawl up here and make their cocoons. They'd wriggle. It's like doing a dance. And then they shrink and then they turn into that. And then when they're ready, they open and turn into a butterfly and we let them out.
Hey, beautiful. You ready? So Sherlock's a Maremma, and their role is to guard the flock. It's a very ancient breed, totally untrainable, but we've never lost a chook duck or goose from within the orchard while we've had him. He's caused a few challenges. He's an absolute delight. Sherlock! Sherlock, come here. You know, they've got mates that live in the suburbs, and they understand how lucky we are, you know, to have this little patch of land where they can trash their bikes or build cubbies or have big bonfires or whatever they want to do. I think they've discovered a new way of go-karting. He was meant to be mowing and then, you know, handy with a bit of rope. The garden is really my domain, and I've worked out that Richard can actually build anything I can dream up. I will always say, can we do this? Is this practical? And he'll go, well, we can't do it that way, but we can do it this way. So we do have this amazing collaboration. I mean, we have these wonderful sayings that we talk about being grounded and down to earth, and it's all about our connection, about our ability to get our hands in there and get dirty and potter with plants and observe the beauty. And I think the ultimate benefit comes to us when we garden as an active doing thing. I'm quite neurotic if I don't get to garden. I need to garden. It's my therapy.
Have a look at this cauliflower. It just goes to show that if you feed your soil and your plants, they'll continue to feed you, because it's all about applying the right fertiliser at the right time to keep your garden happy and healthy. First up, compost. I'm going to top dress these plants using some of this beautiful homemade compost that was made right here at the patch. Couple of shovel loads on each plant. Just spread it around and lightly fork it in. So you see, compost is like a sponge. It holds onto water and nutrient and releases it when the plants need it. It also helps stop a lot of your nutrients from leaching down through your soil. When it comes to plant nutrients, just remember the big three, N, P, K, which stands for nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. They're the main ones that you'll need in your garden because they're used in high amounts compared to the other nutrients. The trick is to strike a balance because each one plays a very specific role. So you can start to fertilise depending on whether you're growing leaves, flowers or fruit. First up, nitrogen. You can usually find this in fertilisers like this fish emulsion here. It's used for leafy growth. Just mix it up to what it suggests on the label and apply it every fortnight. And apply it to the roots, because that's where the nutrient's going to be taken up, not the leaves. Next, phosphorus. This is the one you apply for flowers and fruit. And a good source of it is, yes, blood and bone. Apply a good handful every 3 to 4 square metres and tease it into your soil. If you apply it at maturity, it'll help plants like your broccoli and your ricotta chili here produce bigger, better and more flowers, florets and fruit. The last of the big three is potassium. One of the main things it does is it strengthens cell walls. So it's really good for hardening plants up. Works really well on tender plants and anything that's staked. Now, a good source of potassium is sulphate of potash. And I'm going to apply a small amount of this to these broad beans. But it'll work on things like tomatoes, capsicums, melons, even fruit trees. And they'll all benefit from a good dose of potassium through the year. There you go, garden's all fed, and I can't wait till I get to eat the results. Well, good luck in your own garden, and I'll catch you next time.
With winter behind us and spring in the air, there couldn't be a better time to get out there and get stuck into the garden. And some chocolate. We'll be back next week with more great ideas and gardens. I'll see you then.
There's an old saying that agriculture makes life possible, but it's horticulture that makes it worthwhile. Well, I'll be at a garden that is one of the Australian birthplaces of both of these noble arts.
If you think this wonderful spread of flowers, fruit and foliage is great, just wait until you meet the wonderful gardener behind them.
And I'll show you an innovative public space project that's delivering benefits for the whole community.